welcome to the Mime Radio Show. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin, and we both have big smiles on our faces, because I think we have a really, really interesting guest.
And we have Michael behind the screens, taking care of making us look beautiful and sound good.
I'm expecting him, some fingers to come over the top of the frame, and then these eyes come up and look. Maybe we can work that out sometime. Right? But he's the guy that makes this all happen. So Michael Diaz, we appreciate you, and we're glad you have our backs.
So tell us a little bit about our guest.
Yeah. Quote, everyone is an artist and theater is soul food, nourishment to help find your greatest gift, your own voice, end quote. Passion, persistence, poetry, and puns. Find what you love. Keep doing it in unexpected zigzag ways and always exercise your humor. When all else fails, you can still laugh. Nobody can stop you. These are words expressed by our guest today, Barbara Leigh. Barbara was the co-founder and leader of the Milwaukee Public Theater with more than 100 original works to her name, and has spent 4 decades acting, teaching, leading workshops, and organizing community projects. After suffering partial paraplegia in a serious accident in 1987, she took on hurt and healing with art, addressing trauma, survival, caregivers, Alzheimer's, abuse scars, and even the Americans with Disabilities Act. The company was founded as Friends Mime Theater in 1974 and later changed its name to Milwaukee Public Theater. Their street theater style, employing skillful committed dell'arte clown techniques with music, dance, puppetry, poetry, parades, and wildly colorful spectacles of all sorts, was shaped to address the most serious real-life issues facing individuals and communities. Issues such as sexual abuse, mental illness, end-of-life care, HIV/AIDS, bullying, nuclear power, racism, and healing. So let's welcome in Barbara Leigh.
Hello.
Hello, Barbara. So glad that you're here.
Yeah.
Our original plan was for you to accompany our wonderful Reed Gilbert, who is the founder of the Valley Studio, and we were going to interview you both, but unfortunately that was not meant to be.
I'm so sorry, but I am so happy to be able to talk about Reed, because he was and continues to be such an influence on so many lives, and certainly for mine.
Was before your experience as a student at Valley Studio taking classes, had you done theater before or had a theater degree in college or anything like that? How did you get there?
I was actually working on my doctorate in theater, and I was hunting for a dissertation topic, and I was taking Asian theater at the time, and my Asian theater professor said, you must read about Michel Saint-Denis. He started theater schools all over the world, and he's written an article that I think you should read. Well, of course, I read it, and at the end of this, it was all about the L'École de Vieux Colombier, Jacques Apost's school for actors. It was a revolutionary acting school that really started with children. And I read this article, and at the end, it says, no one has written the history of this school. Someone must do this before the memories are allowed to fade. And I'm like, well, yes, it's me. I have to do this. It was so exciting. So that took me on this wild ride of going to France, talking with Jacques Apost's daughter, Marie-Hélène d'Aste, and she allowed me to come into her apartment. She gave me the key. But the category, the catch-all was, no, don't take anything out. You can just copy everything. So it was the time of no place where you could copy anything. I couldn't take anything out. I had to rent a typewriter and type out this whole thing.
This was what, the late 60s or early 70s? Yeah.
This was early 70s.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was the start. And the root of the training in this school was mime. It was movement. It was creating theater that was uh, really more, well, let me start from the beginning of where theater was at the time of Jacques Coupeau. Theater training was basically you copy the most famous actor. It was the star system. But then when more realism came into the picture, it was completely bizarre to have somebody who was elocuting and just being very declamatory and not speaking to each other and not being realistic. So there needed to be a kind of actor that was more alive and truly living on stage. And then that was the start of kind of transforming theater. But then Coupeau wanted to go further. He wanted theater that was more, that would hark back to the roots of theater, where it was really a communal experience and where theater dealt with issues and concerns of the people, or going back into the Greeks and the early Greek theater that spoke to just incredible life issues. So he wanted to start with the theater that was with children. And he would start in silence. He would work with masks, with movement, and really try to find the essence of a character by building it from kind of the outside in and the inside out. He worked with both. So this was so exciting to me, but I thought, I can't really understand this unless I do it myself. So I was thinking, where can I possibly find anybody who's doing mime these days? Well, there was Paul's bookstore had a poster in the window in Madison, and Reed Gilbert was doing a mime performance. And so I was like, I got to go to that. I went to the performance, and I was completely captivated. This is what I want to do. And fortunately for me, he was giving mime workshops. So I took some of the workshops, and then there was an opportunity to actually go to Valley Studio in the summer. And I just zoomed over there. I just was like, yes, I have to absorb this. So it just grew and grew. Eventually I became the, Reed's assistant first, and then I became kind of the assistant director. Then we were kind of the team, the performing team. We traveled all over the state doing workshops and performances. It was just an incredible creative experies that.
But how long had Valley Studio been going when you joined? Like who?
It was very new.
Was Reed the one who started it? Was there a group of people or two more individuals that?
He was really the soul of it. His was the concept, and of course his background was in not just mime, but also in Asian theater. And he'd studied in India. He'd studied with Japanese art. I mean, he was really quite. And then he'd been a minister, so he had a very spiritual point of view on the whole thing, which I think one of the main concepts that he instilled was respect. He would talk about respect as spectare, the Latin to look, re again. You don't take anything for granted. You keep looking again and again. Find the essence that way. And I just, that word has stayed with me throughout my life, throughout all the work that I have done. And it has just been kind of a formative rock for me.
And the Valley Studio has a very rich history. There are many, many people that studied there, and even now there's sort of a reunion going on where those students are connecting to each other to preserve this gem of a history.
Yes, so exciting.
And then some of the great teachers, master teachers over there. You mentioned Asian theater, Japanese theater. I know Mamiko, the very prolific, amazing Japanese young woman at that time. Mime was there, and people who had, were master teachers of the crew technique, and there was even contemporary dance there, wasn't there? I mean, it was a kind of a melting pot of new and expressive forms of movement in the theater sense, right?
Carla Mazzoni Clementi was there.
Yeah.
Media. Yes, it was and just an incredible amalgam of styles and of points of view that all made sense in that context, because it was nature. There was just being in nature doing this work was very magical.
And this was like a lot of people, especially the younger generations, don't know about Valley Studio. So this had originally been a farm, right, in the countryside of Wisconsin, correct?
In Spring Green was Lovely Valley, and Spring Green itself, Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, had his Taliesin studio there, and there was a rich history of kind of mysticism and poetry and the arts, and a kind of I don't know, of, well, magic. I'll just say magic.
Yeah, I like the word you use, respect. Can you describe maybe what it was like to be a mime in 1972 or 3 or 4? Like what you know, that's my era too, but I'd like to hear from someone else how you.
Well, it was new, nobody was doing it then.
Yeah.
So we would go into a school, for example, several hundred kids, and they'd all be shouting and screaming, and we would just come out on stage and Reed would come out doing the wall, and kids would be like mesmerized. What is he doing? And complete silence. And it was just like, for some, it was the kind of, how can I say it? It was suddenly they had to pay attention. There was nobody telling them to pay attention. It was so much focus on what we were doing that they had to focus too. And when we did workshops with the kids, I just worked with a group of 3rd through 5th graders, and the kids now are so much less focused.
Yeah.
It's so sad. But at the time, we would go in and do workshops, and the kids were just so fascinated and so excited to learn this art form. And it is a wonderful, I mean, it's so basic to human expression to be able to understand what the body is saying without you talking. And it was,
I know you're very interested, which we'll talk about later, like some of these bigger themes and social forces in the world that you've infused in your material that helped you conceive what you wanted to do. But at that time, did your work the mime work have some, social consciousness in terms of ideas, or did you was it just, magic on stage, or did you also address themes that were important to being a person,
I think it was more about relationships. So I don't recall, like we explored different kinds of animals, different kinds of creatures and their relationships. We didn't. Later, when I left the studio and I was working with Mike Moynihan in Milwaukee, we explored a lot more of those in-depth kinds of things. I know Reed, before I knew him, he had worked on some very cutting edge kind of pieces about slavery, about issues of those kinds of relationships, of dominance, of submission. And there was certainly some of that in what we were doing too. It was a way to talk about just the way people put each other down or kind of raise each other up just by the way they focus on their attitude towards each other. We were doing much more of that kind of more basic exploratory.
I think what's really amazing about the art of mime is that because you're not using words, that you can get across a message or a social situation, that it doesn't come off as being preachy or didactic. So because people are absorbing it through not through their word brain, but for their visual brain.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be non-threatening in a way, like because words have such significance in our culture. What was Reed like as a teacher or a performer? Can you talk a little bit about his character and what his his style and persona was like?
Yeah. Well, he was very positive, of course, and he had a great sense of humor with
Mhm.
people. And one of the way he started his class was we would clean the floor, which is
Mm.
very unusual at the time and
That's a
remains
very Asian dojo.
very Asian. Yes,
Yeah.
it was respect for the space
Mm.
and respect for each other, which was wonderful. And then just really paying attention. And that was such a fundamental keystone to his work, paying attention.
Mm.
Um, and just his way of acknowledging every person. He was unlike a lot of teachers that kind of set themselves up as, like the master.
Mhm.
He was much more humble about that. And he was very respectful of each individual and very encouraging of
Mm.
our own imaginations and creativity, which was so important for me because I was pretty shy and I had no idea what I could do. And the fact that I was able to express all these different characters, like I had tried to do some theater before, but I really didn't like it because there were all these parts with these bitchy women and I just didn't like the characters. But as a mime, I could identify with all life forms. And that to me was and remains one of the most powerful things about it, that there's such an attitude of people that, human beings are on top. No, I'm sorry. We're all part of this amazing web, and we have to acknowledge that. And I think Mime does such a wonderful job doing that.
Mm.
You can be an ant, and then this ant has a personality too, and it can talk to you. Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, I think you're hitting it. I think you're talking about the essence and the power of what mime really is. And it's unfortunate that in some quarters it's just become kind of a throwaway joke or just a trick, that you can do, a party trick or something like that, so.
But it's also important for having places to study it, because the more you study it, the deeper you can go. I mean, you can start with something that's just entertainment, and then you start to think, like, I have ideas that I want to express, and you as a creator performer can delve deeper. When we do these interviews, we like to ask people how they prepare to go out on stage. So this practice that Reed had of cleaning the space, did you adopt that as a practice for yourself when you would start performing, or did you have a different way of getting prepared?
I think it was more of a spiritual practice of kind of aligning myself with whatever. Just the concept, like he would talk about how the posture was pulling yourself up by this string.
Mm-hmm.
Did a lot of that kind of human puppetry kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But aligning myself with the essence of being with our creator and being in the zone. That's I'm really focusing on where I was and not thinking about the audience and not thinking about, am I going to be good? I had to think about what am I doing? Really focus on what am I doing. And
in your performing, do you have a direct connection with the audience, or is there a fourth wall between you and the audience?
It depends. Doing a mime show, we didn't. Of course, we were in the beginning. When I was working with Reed, we never talked. I mean, everything was silent. So there was definitely an acknowledgement of the audience, but there wasn't something that we would kind of see what they no, there wasn't that kind of thing.
But one thing that's interesting, I think, even though the mime, the certain styles of mime are like looking at this magical figure in a world somewhere that you can't quite touch, but yet your work later in Milwaukee was so, it sounds like it's so interactive at times.
Yes.
So, and it's interesting that you have these first experiences maybe as the, the magical figure in the, in the aura of the space, but then the Milwaukee Public Theater is departed in many ways, didn't it, from that, and you broke down those walls and so forth.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Did you think the mime work you did earlier at Valley Studio with Reed and with were you part of the Wisconsin mime troupe, or was that
Yes,
after?
well, the two of us were the Wisconsin.
Yeah, yeah. So did you find that work really laid the foundation for the work that you've done later?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we did eventually. I mean, we worked for during the winter when we toured. It was just the two of us. But during the summer, it expanded to I don't know, up to 10 people. And so there were short pieces by a number of people. And it was also very much of ensemble work. And that was the other thing about Reed, that he really focused on us working together and really being very sensitive to each other in terms of the whole piece. Yeah, and each working towards the essence of the piece itself, not trying to upstage each other, which
were the pieces that you created started by different individuals in the company, or was it all Reed's material, or how did that work?
No, he really encouraged people to come up with their own ideas.
Yeah.
Were the participants of the upper Midwest, most of them, or were there people from all over the country, or even
from all over? I was amazed. Yeah.
Yeah.
People from New York, people from the West Coast.
And the Valley Studio program, was that just a summer institute?
Well, it attempted to be year-round, but it was very difficult to do it during the winter.
Yeah, I've heard some comments by during these Valley Studio reunions, people talking about what it was like there in the wintertime. Yeah. What's when you decided to leave and seek your destiny elsewhere, what made that decision for you to move on away from Spring Green and so forth?
Well, it was very complicated.
Is that a loaded question? Is that complicated?
It was very complex. I mean, I did not want to leave, but
yeah,
just a whole series of circumstances. And then part of it was that I wasn't getting anything done on my dissertation. I was having too much fun. So
you do even now you do a PowerPoint presentation, don't you? That sort of tracing from the Capot years, or even before eventually into the Valley Studio influences and so forth.
Yes.
So you have this scholarly side to you you think too, which is great. Sometimes I think too much, but I think it's very important to know to look at the world and see the influences that, create stuff. Yeah. Well,
I realized early on that if I tried to do more of a philosophical dissertation, I would still be working on it. If I could take a chunk of history and just describe that would be plenty. So that was pretty much the dissertation, L'École de Vieux Colombier from 1923 to 25. So those are the most formative years.
And that Vieux Colombier school had so many different influences, and that timeline that you create through Decroux and Lecoq and Marceau and into what's going on in the United States and the Valley Studio. It's really fascinating to look at.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So my dissertation is 700 pages.
Wow.
After that, I was like, I'm never sitting down again for more than 5 minutes at a time. Well, then when my accident happened, I was like, oh
my God. Yeah. Before we get to that big life-changing event, what were your origins? How did you become inspired to work in theater and movement? And are you a Midwest girl originally, or where did you come from, and who influenced you? What artists or parents or friends might have influenced you to like put on whiteface and so forth.
I blame it on my mother, of course.
Yeah.
My mother was a theater artist. She's
Oh.
from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, small town. But her parents, my grandparents, were very encouraging. So she loved to tell stories, and she realized she really wanted to be an actress. So she studied in Chicago. And then when she met my father in Chicago, he was an aspiring playwright, and they moved to New York. And she worked for the Clarity Major Children's Theater. She did one-woman shows. She did Peter Pan, for example, playing all the characters. And then, later when the war happened, my father went into the service, and I was almost born, so she had to go back to Sheboygan to have me. And I was mad at her about that later. So why couldn't you have me in New York? So we moved into my grandparents' house. It was this great big old house 2 blocks from Lake Michigan, which was actually an amazing childhood, spending time at the beach almost every day.
Wow.
And then my mother, as a storyteller, she didn't have a whole lot of opportunity as a professional actress, as you can imagine, in Sheboygan. But she did raise us on stories, and I became a total story junkie. So I always wanted to be able to tell stories, but since my mother was in Sheboygan, my mother was kind of a freak because she spoke with elocution and diction and range and volume and passion, and people in Sheboygan speak kind of like this. So I was like, Mom, ooh. She was amazing. I mean, she's totally ahead of her time. She did one-woman shows about women who were making a difference in the world, really strong women leaders. And she traveled all over the state. She was her own publicist. She would pretend that she had an agent. She'd say, oh, well, I will talk with Charlotte about that for her, and I'll get right back to you. She had her own brochure. It was pretty awesome. So on the one hand, I totally admired my mother and loved her very dearly. And on the other hand, was repelled by the fact that she was so different from other people, and I wanted to blend in. So when I started studying mime, it was so freeing for me because I didn't have to deal with speech at all at first. I was just there in the moment, and I could be all these different creatures, and I didn't have to be a specific personality dealing with social issues that women, horrible women, whatever. Yeah. So it was very freeing.
Wow, you said you used to go to the beach. I think, I grew up also near the Pacific Ocean in farmland that borders the Pacific in Southern California, the old classic California. And I think that sense of space of maybe the horizon over the lake, or the ocean or the sky, which is very prevalent, it really helps a young person to shape their imaginations, whether it's watching the clouds or, just looking at space itself as it moves to the horizon. I think that I can understand when you mentioned that, how that's in your head, and it makes sense to me, that you might think of yourself as a mime later on, Yeah. So.
And also reading every fairy tale book there was, like the blue, the gold, the black, the purple, the red. I was in this mode where I was thinking about castles and princes, and I thought about France. Like France became this magical kingdom where I would find something amazing. So at an early age, I really did want to go to France, and so I studied French in high school, and then in college I took classes, and I was kind of getting tired of it all. What am I really doing with these classes? And then again, there was a notice that said junior year abroad in France. Oh, so I applied for that and I got a scholarship to spend my junior year in Aix-en-Provence. And that also was very formative because of learning French. And I accidentally graduated in French. It's another story. um, that set me on the road. Okay, so what can I do with this? And then I ended up getting married. And so I wanted to stay on campus. So I started teaching French as a TA. And then I was like, oh, what can I do with this? I hated teaching French. So then I took a speech course. They didn't even offer a theater major or anything. I took a speech course.
Is that University of Wisconsin in Madison?
Yes. And for my final project, it was the speech course was taught by the head of the department. And I did a satire on the class as my final project. and he laughed so hard. He said, if you ever want to go into this field, let me know. Well, that was an invitation I couldn't refuse. So when I couldn't figure out what to do, I went to him. He said, well, you could get your MFA, or since you have all these credits in French, you could get your PhD in French theater. And I thought, it's not a lot of work, but so I started on that road. And that's kind of, it all kind of amazingly fell together. So.
Yeah.
And when did the spark to step out from behind the spectacles and the books and the research and to get on the stage in front of people? When did that hit you?
Well,
was your mother's spirit like on your shoulder, like kind of whispering in your ear? What was going on there?
In some ways, yes, but also the fact that I was doing this dissertation and then actually learning about what was going on in this school and actually starting to do it myself, I became liberated really from my mother, from everything else, because it was a whole different art form. Mm-hmm. And I could discover the things that I could do that I just never dreamed of doing, that just happened. Because
it's time.
Time for a gift.
Gift time. So I think you received something in the mail, right, Barbara?
Yes. Oh.
I think that music signifies by our hidden musicians that it's time for you to open the gift.
Oh, yes.
And tell us where it came from and what you find inside.
All right. It says, please wait to open during the 529 interview on the Mime radio show podcast.
And here we are.
Mime Museum. Description from Barbara Lee's Valio Studio Archive contains grass clippings from the field in front of the studio in Spring Green, Wisconsin. Oh my goodness, look at that.
Yes. Takes you back to the beautiful nature and all of the surroundings of Valley Studio.
Oh yes, very miraculous. Thank you so much.
Did you guys have to share mowing the lawn, or did it just grow wild? I never actually ever got there, even though I have a lot of friends that did. But how did you guys? Was it like a community of gardeners that you guys organized to take care of the place?
They were too busy doing mime classes, James. They weren't doing their gardening.
Really were. There wasn't any gardening that I recall at that time, because it was very busy. I'll just put it this way: I was not involved in gardening. Maybe it wasn't in my.
So Barbara, skip ahead a few years and tell us a little bit about the Friends Mime Theater and the Milwaukee Public Theater. How did all that come about?
It's also amazing. When I got to Milwaukee, I was living with my parents because I didn't have any money. And I didn't know quite what to do, except I thought, well, maybe I can teach mime. So I met this wonderful woman, Diane Johnson, who was the head of UW Extension Programming, and they were doing all these creative dramatics workshops all over the city. And so I started teaching creative dramatics, but I also really wanted to teach mime. So she said, well, why not? We'll help to support that. And I found that I was.
Wait, can I just stop for a second?
Yes.
You said creative dramatics, which is actually an old term. They used that when I was in college, but which is kind of a crazy term because all dramatics should be creative. But that was for those of you listening or watching that don't know what that is. It's more or less very creative children's theater, or
Yes.
usually for young people. And there's a teaching element to it as well as a performance element.
And the other interesting thing about that is that creative dramatics was something that Capot was really doing. And
really, yeah.
The woman Suzanne Bing, who was also very formative in the school, had studied Montessori training.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was very imbued with the idea of creativity and improvisation, working with children on the kinds of techniques that they were exploring. So Capot was a little more snobbish about that. There was a man named Léon Chancerelle who started using creative dramatics in the whole Boy Scout, Girl Scout movement. And Capot was kind of like, well, yeah, okay. But no, it was, again, one of those offshoots of his work that although he wasn't particularly fond of it, it was very formative. It probably reached more people than any other facet of it. So no, it was great.
Anyway, sorry to segue there, but going back to your story about how Friends Mime Theater started and Milwaukee Public Theater, yeah.
So segue to me in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Teaching mime. I started through the extension. They allowed me to offer the class, and it was going to be at the Water Street Art Center, which is where Theater X was located, and where there was this radical bookstore. So it's a little theater there, and time came for people to show up for the class, and 10 people came. 15, 20, 25, 30, like there were like 40 people that showed up for this class. And I was like, we'll do 2 classes. So that's what we did. And there was one person, well, the whole class was pretty awesome. But there was one person Mike Moynihan, who was the only one who really tried to take the art of mime into the art of contemporary social activism. And I was just, of course, really drawn to that. I was like, we could really say something. Had been something that I subliminally really wanted to do, but couldn't figure out quite how to do it. But Mike was right there, like, we can do this. And he became so, well, I worked with a lot of other people in this troupe. We actually became an improvisation and mime troupe. But eventually, Mike and I formed Friends Mime Theater as the 2 of us, plus Karen Kohlberg. And that triumvirate created just a whole incredible, we just really were able to tackle so many issues in a really fun, exploratory way. Mike and I did a lot as a duo where we would explore relationships. Again, we also did a lot of music. We were the mime music people for a while there. Because Mike played guitar and we created songs.
Is there any record of that work? I know in those days, video was like reel to reel and so forth. Was there any, did you ever have any records other than having to?
I am so sorry. So much of that work was, Mike was also a filmmaker and a visual artist. He was a cartoonist. So we had all of that on reel to reel, but it's it's gone. I tried to resurrect it on the last 5 years. We wanted to make a film of our history, and it just so sad. So no, I do have some of the songs recorded, which are very fun.
So you guys would compose the songs, or did you take
Yes.
them from other sources?
We composed them.
Wow.
Yeah, and I love music myself, and I've been a singer all my life with choirs, etc. I was in every ensemble in high school, the madrigals, the choir, etc. So anyway, I started playing. Well, I played the tin whistle, but I had played I played wind instruments, but I always aspired to play the saxophone.
Oh yeah, wow.
I learned how to play the saxophone.
Wow, you're a woman after my own heart. That was one of my
clarinet before. So I said,
Wow.
saxophone. And then I wanted to play the drums, of course. So I learned how to play the drums. Then I wanted to learn how to play the accordion because I had played the piano as a child. So I got a small accordion, the kind with keys on it, not the one, not the thumbs. So we started doing these little parades before our shows. And during the winter, we would do these smaller pieces at Theater X. And then in the summer, we decided we were going to do these very populist summer shows in the parks and wherever. We're going to be completely free. And the first show we did there was about 30 of us, and they ranged from age 8 to 80.
That was the people that were performing. The people that were performing.
Yes.
And did they come out of your classes, out of the
classes, out of the woodwork. Actually, we started with just a fun baseball team. It was just a clown baseball team, but then we worked into this performances, and people would audition for it. And we created original pieces that were kind of based, like one of the first ones was the Stone Cutter. It was an ancient story. And then we would do other short pieces. And we did a lot of work with masks and mime. Obviously.
And did you stay mostly within the state of Wisconsin? Is that where you're?
Oh yeah,
Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee, actually.
Yeah.
And we would just show up. We'd just show up in the parks or on a street corner, or people would just wherever people were. We would do parades in the neighborhoods. The whole idea was to get people thinking about themselves as creative, and they could join the parade. Then gradually we started making things before the parade. So we'd make headbands and made colorful things and shakers and stuff that kids could play. We made really funky masks, not the over the mouth kind, or over the head. So people really got involved with what we were doing. And then we gradually got more and more sophisticated in terms of our skills. So Karen Kohlberg, for example, taught us all how to juggle, and then she became really fantastic. And we started hiring people from New York and California, and all these jugglers who could stand on each other's shoulders and pass clubs and torches and sickles and knives and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And then we had a wonderful slack rope walker, and he would walk across the slack rope, and at the other end was a credit card or a $10 bill, and just funny stuff.
Were you ever confused with the Friends Roadshow? The Django Edwards.
Oh,
back in the day, was there ever any confusion among the public, like who was who? There was a group called Friends Roadshow, that was totally different style, but
yes.
Crazy style. Yeah, I'm just wondering if
we had a whole family of fatheads of all nationalities, all John.
That's fascinating.
And
so now this was it seems like you have hooked into the spirit of what theater has been over the centuries, in world theater, this way to connect with the community.
Yes.
Involvement, all the parade-like qualities, the addressing themes, the celebration. It seems like you really were able to hook into that and make that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the summer shows all had these kinds of funny, whimsical short pieces, but we would always have one longer piece that dealt with an issue. One of my favorites was learning how to read.
Mm.
It was very musical too. Music was a very fundamental to these pieces. And we worked with some incredible musicians who grew up, I mean, who were started as teenagers with us and went on to do all kinds of incredible things. So, yeah, it was.
When did the group was then named Milwaukee Public Theater? What was the driving force to change the name, and how did this word public become important in what you were doing?
It was, we got tired of explaining why we talk. Wait a minute, you're right. Why are you talking? And then we have to explain what mime really means is to imitate, doesn't have to be silent. That's one form of mime. Yes. And certainly mime, and as a physical art form, was very much core to our work, but also being able to talk and address things in speech was also important as we morphed and changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So reading in some of the information, and the word public, I think, is important, because I read somewhere that you wanted to be able to offer these things free to the public.
Absolutely. All of this stuff was free.
Yeah.
It was, I think about, could we do something like this today? And there's so much distrust now. There's so much antipathy, and we need something like this desperately. And yet, would people be able to get together? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly worthy of, you hear me out there?
Yeah.
Try this.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
Get out there.
Well, it's extraordinary that you did it. 45 years is a very long time for a theater company, and particularly in the United States, where we have no government support for the arts, or very little.
Yes.
For you to survive for such a long time, and specifically for doing free performances for the public, an incredible mission.
How do we do it?
Yeah.
Well, we also got, when we did these performances in the parks in the beginning, we were able to, the Parks Department worked with us to let us access what organizations were doing big picnics in the parks. And so we contacted those people and said, how would you like it if we set up near your picnic so everybody can have access to it if they want to? And then if you can donate something to us, that would be great. And they often did. And then we also got grants. Mike was a really good grants writer.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a lot of grants for doing what we did, because there was just nothing like it. Nobody else was doing.
Did you find that you were more of a director as time went on rather than a performer, or did you still keep performing?
Well, it depends. Like in the beginning, I was definitely a performer, but after the accident, I couldn't. Well, we changed after the accident too. We couldn't keep the summer show going the way we had. It was too expensive. We paid everybody. I don't know if it was really a living wage at that time, but they were paid for the whole summer. But we just couldn't keep it going in that with that intensity for more than, I think, it was probably about 10 years of that.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the accident. So this was a shift in your life, I think. What happened there, and how did your mind and body change after that? Like how did that take you to a new place?
Wow. Well, we actually were touring the Snow Queen. This was in the winter, and this was the first time I had really directed a show, and I was also in it, and also had put together a lot of the music, and it was just a really exciting production for me. But we were booked, two different people were booking us. One booked us on the far western part of the state at 7:00 at night on December 3rd. the other booked us at noon back in Milwaukee on the 4th.
Oh my.
And I found out about that. I said, no, we can't do that. That's way too close. And they're like, no, you have to do it. They're counting on you. So, of course, being young and like naive, we thought, well, of course, we can do that. Well, on our way back from the 7:00 show, maybe around, I don't know, 2 a.m., we hit a patch of black ice on the bridge. I was laying in the back of the van with all this sound equipment around me. And I sat up just in time to see us heading over an embankment.
Wow.
Nice.
Then I blacked out. And when I came to, there were people around. They'd called an ambulance, apparently. And someone was saying, are you okay, Barb? Are you okay? Can you move? And I tried moving my legs, and they were not moving. I was starting to freak out. So they took me by ambulance to a hospital near Watertown, and 5 different doctors stuck pins in me to see if I had sensation. And I did not. And I was just, my legs were just spasming like crazy. So then they figured out that I had a spinal cord injury, and they were concerned that there was a complete severing of the spine. So I was taken by ambulance back to Milwaukee, Frederick Hospital, and I was in a 9-hour operation where they took out a couple of ribs and. Well, I was a member of the Minneskinnigan Drums, Native American organization, and my friends with the drum actually drummed for me the whole 9 hours of this operation. People donated blood. I mean, it was nuts. And they realized that my spine was not severed, but it was just still really a lot of neuropathy and a lot of definitely it was going to be partially paralyzed, and they didn't think I'd walk it again, basically was their diagnosis. But I had so much support. I was unbelievable. Just people just came to the hospital to see me, and they put all kinds of wonderful, like amazing, like posters on the ceiling and flowers and just wonderful cards and plants. It was just, and stone, I mean, just magical stuff. So I felt so incredibly surrounded with love, and I had the most amazing visions of like these creatures that were inside that were trying to help heal me. It was a very, very dramatic time for me. And then I started noticing, having worked as a clown for so many years, I started noticing all the funny things in the hospital, all the really quirky people and bizarre happenings. And just the whole bizarre thing of losing half your body is like just very surreal. So I started, this was during the Winter Olympics too, so I would set myself up as being, and now Barbara Leigh is going to attempt to transfer from her wheelchair to with a band. Are you ready? And I would take like, and ladies and gentlemen, 10, 9, 8, 7, blast off. He made it. A round of applause. Was that a 10 or what? And then one of my OTs said, would you like to make something like, I don't know, model airplane or something? I said, could I make a pair of puppet legs? So I, my OT brought in a pair of pantyhose. We stuffed them, and then we put my shoes on them with some of that cast material, to keep them in. And then we put fish line on the knees, and I would sit on one of those benches where the curtain comes right to the edge of the bench. So I would sit next to my legs, and my legs were hit, just there. And then they put on the music, and my legs would dance. It was just so wonderful. So I was discovering all these funny things. And I thought, I could maybe even create a show about this. Yeah. And I was really fortunate because the managing director at the Milwaukee Repertory Theater was sort of definitely an acquaintance, sort of a friend. And I went to a party after I got out of the hospital, and she was there. And I said, Sarah Connor, Sarah, I have this idea for a show about my healing process. She says, yes, Barbara, I have to circulate, but call me. So I called Sarah. She said, I think we can get a grant for this. Yes. What do you need? So she was a powerhouse. She got a grant from the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. I said I wanted to be able to tour the show all over the city, the states, country. So I need a director. I need a music. I need somebody to do music. I need a stage manager. I need costumer. I need set. I need lights. She got it all for me. And then she set up the Stackner Theater for me to do the show for a weekend. So I was able to create this amazing, surreal show called the Survival Revival Review. That was like my healing process. It was just so wonderful.
And did that trigger your other thinking of how to approach the arts in the future? Did you
Absolutely.
The public theater, the Milwaukee Public Theater became really interested in these different themes now?
Well, we always were interested in the different themes. But I think this expanded it. We had been working with we've been working with HIV, for example. We've been working on the whole idea. Like I began to be much more assertive in the company in terms of what we were doing. And I went to see a performance, for example, about sexual abuse by Lakita Caldwell. She had interviewed all these, at least 50 women who'd been sexually abused. And she put together this really powerful show. And at the end of the performance, she said, I'm not sure what to do with this show. And I said, I'll help you. So I kind of became a producer. When Mike left the theater in 92 or 3, he gave me all of his files. I got a computer just like his. I got all the amazing things that he'd written before that I could piggyback on. And then I set about raising money to do these kinds of projects and was able to get grants and was actually in the show myself. I can do some, I didn't tell you, I was very fortunate because 44 days after the injury, I was in this hot tub because I was still in the hospital. My incision wasn't healing very well. And my legs were kind of out of the water in this hot tub. And I was thinking, I wish they'd go down. I think they need to be warm too. And they did. And I was like, whoa, come up. And they did. I'm like, oh my God, they're with me. They're back.
Wow.
The most exciting day of my entire life.
Oh my.
Oh.
So all that training with your puppet legs got your other legs to come back to life.
Inspired, yes.
Do you think the mime training helped you in recovering just to a certain extent in terms of up here and elsewhere?
Well, also just the being able to move one part of the body at a time.
Yeah, isolation. Yeah.
Isolations was very important. And being able to just focus on what I was doing and not just flying off and saying, oh, I can't do this. No. Focus. No, all of that was incredibly important.
Yeah, talk about the point in space or the fixed point.
Points in space. And just being able to really be where my body was and focus on, okay, now you're going to do this. Now you're going to do that. And now you're going to try this. And if you can't do that, well, we'll try it. I think it was also the attitude of exploration, the attitude of being open to discovery of what the other, the other discovery that I made, I was learning how to walk with canes.
Yeah.
And I started looking at this cane and I realized it has holes in it. I wonder if I could play it. So I took it apart.
Wow.
And I've never played the flute. I mean, I could do this, but I played the tin whistle. And so I put a tin whistle mouthpiece in it, and it has a great tune. I mean, it has a really nice tone to it. So that just really was like, oh my God.
You can't play it now. It's not set up. You're just.
I should have realized that I would tell you.
Wow, that's
That's
fascinating.
amazing. So
It is
you
amazing.
can turn your cane, which you used to walk, you can turn it into a musical instrument. That's
Yes,
beautiful.
yes.
Wow.
And I would do all these things, these mime things. Was it like, I'd get the baseball and I'd shoot pool and I would with a periscope.
Yeah, wow.
Stuff. And then I would go and then I would take it apart in front of the audience. I wonder if and then I would end with, and the soul of my cane is secretly musical. Da-da-da.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
And was this in the one woman show that you were describing, or is this a different?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was part of it. That was like the ending.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
I really am inspired by your statements about the power of art to help people survive injuries and disability and aging and abuse. That art has that power, and specifically this wonderful art of mime. It's like very inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Jacques Capot. Thank you, all those.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been really wonderful talking to you. It's been inspiring for me, and I hope that we can, in a way, let people know about this long timeline and the history and all the research that you've done, and specifically the history of the Valley Studio, and it will inspire people to create another school, maybe, which would be wonderful.
How do you, Barbara, how do you see the climate now, the cultural climate in our country as maybe opposed to 40, 50 years ago? I know some things never changed. I mean, there's always the same challenges, but I was reading where when you let go finally of the Milwaukee Public Theater, there was a statement by you that, well, everybody's doing it now. How do you feel about what's happened now in our country, or where we could go, or what's lost or gained? What are your thoughts on that? Where do young people go to learn the arts? All these burning questions in our more isolated, separate society. The communal aspect is changing before our eyes, especially with the pandemic and all this. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, where we've come to and what the challenges are, and where would a young person go to learn?
Well, before COVID, I thought that there were some really great opportunities because there's been so much more arts in the school, especially in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is an incredible arts town. There are so many theater companies and poet organizations and comedians and just everything, musicians, you name it. And there have been a lot of opportunities for children to learn in many of the arts. There's arts residency programs that are pretty, decently funded. And there are a lot of philanthropic organizations that also support the arts in the schools. But with COVID, we really couldn't go into the schools except virtually. And I think it was very, very hard for children. I think part of what's happened to them is they've lost their social skills. They're just absolutely wild. I was just mentioning that I just did a project with 3rd through 5th graders, was able to get a grant to work with them to create an original performance or play about our pollinators and what's happening to them. And they were just totally off the charts. I mean, just wild. But somehow we managed to corral them, and I was working with Quasimodo Physical Theater, which we gave Milwaukee Public Theater gave all of our puppets, our supplies, our everything to Quasimodo because they were certainly the closest theater company to what we used to be in terms of creating shows that really deal with issues.
When you say used to be, like what changed? What like is that just the process of moving on to another dream, so to speak, or?
Well, I think what happened with us is so much, a lot of our work depended on playwrights with Milwaukee Public Theater, depended on playwrights who could really tackle a lot of these issues. And when Mike left the company, I am not that person. I mean, I'm more of a midwife to the theater. But I'm not somebody who can just do it all. Like I'm a Pisces, for God's sake. Mike was a Leo. It's like, you do it this way. Oh, good. Somebody knows what they're doing. So it just wasn't. And then I was able to find other people who were doing this work and support that. Like I did with Lakita, and I did with, we started an African youth performance troupe, drum and dance troupe, because Lucky Diop from Senegal came to me and said, these children, they need to learn how to drum. They need to be able to listen to each other. I'm like, yes, I can help you with that. So I helped raise the money for that. But our board gradually wanted me to step down because I was getting older. And it's like, you really need to, and besides, you're not building in a salary for yourself by this. After the accident, I just was donating all my time. So there just wasn't the infrastructure without me, without somebody like myself who was going to be there 24/7. Somebody who needed a lot more money. We had an executive director who lasted for 4 months and then quit, and then we got another one, and I mean, it was just a mess. So,
but this company, Quasimodo, is a physical theater company that sort of became the ones to carry on your work, which is that's a lovely thing, actually.
Yes, it is. I'm so excited that they're doing this.
That's good.
Do you think, like getting back to this question of what does a young person do now? Because there is, I worked in universities for a long time, and now no theater companies tour to these concert lecture series. Very few dance companies. I mean, there's a lot of musicians still and speakers, but the world of theater is rarer now.
Yes.
And my theory is that drama departments in colleges might be obsolete in 20 years just because of the way the formulas are now. It's kind of working against learning the arts in a university in a very specific way, So I'm wondering, do you think things have always been the same, or there's new challenges? What would you suggest should happen, or strengthen what has happened in the past, or what do you think?
I think some of this is going to depend on COVID, of course, because it's very, very difficult for people to really feel safe together.
Yeah.
Certainly, it was very challenging to develop a show with kids who all had to wear masks, for example, and couldn't express anything facially. But I do think that having more grassroots kinds of companies like ourselves, like the ones that you formed yourselves, I think we need that. We need people to feel like they can do that and that they can get out there and express what's going on in ways that can make a difference. Because we certainly, there is such a powerful need for community, for people to feel like they're part of some kind of positive whole. So, I think theater can do that. I
think that will always be present. I mean, the sense of the world needing community will always be here, and that's where theater plays a role. So
Well, it's such an amazing thing that you contributed to that, and now we have people that can use your work as an example. So we thank you for that. That's a good.
What about
thing.
legacy? Do you have any thoughts about legacy, or is that important to you? Like, do you want to be remembered in a certain way, or is it all fluid? You know, we go to the next moment, and what people think is a byproduct that we shouldn't be concerned. What do you have any thoughts? Or, you know, it'd be great if there were films and documentation of, for example, all the work you've done, and that's hard to do sometimes in this world we have.
Well, I actually have a friend who used to do film work for our theater and various residencies, and he really wanted to do a documentary on myself, and I was like, no, let's do a documentary on our theater. So we actually created a piece. We wanted to do it for the Milwaukee Film Festival, and we aspired to do a piece that was more like a 20-minute, but trying to encompass the whole 45 years in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Gradually became increasingly insane. And so we created this piece that was just not very well done. So we did not submit it. And we aspired to do it over again, but then COVID was really rampant and just hasn't. I'd still like to do it. We do have a lot of good footage anyway that we could build on. So yeah, I'd like to continue.
Are you hopeful? Do you have hope for the future? In terms of the arts? I mean, are you?
I just think it's just so fundamental. It's such a fundamental need for people. I mean, certainly stories are the way we communicate best. And if we can do it together, actually, I mean, I guess we see the power of the crowd in some really sad ways right now. So
yeah.
Sad ways. We need inspired leaders who have a real sense of humanity and mission that can touch our hearts, not just our fears.
Yep. Wow.
Thank you so much, Barbara. This has been a wonderful conversation. We really appreciate that. Thank you for being a part of the Mime Radio Show.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
One last question. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, I continue to want to be creative and have a good time and inspire people to tell their stories and find their passions, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it. That's Barbara Leigh, ladies and gentlemen, and all the other people in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. Really pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Join us in 2 weeks for an interview with Bodecker and Neander.